Johnny Depp, for decades, he's been this fixture in Hollywood, a total chameleon on the big screen. But behind all those iconic roles, there's this really complex, often contradictory public image that's been built up, torn down, and then built all over again. In this explainer, we're going to try and dissect that image, get past the headlines, and really understand how a modern icon like him is made.
So who is he, really? Is he the sensitive artist, the global movie star, the misunderstood outcast? To even begin to find the real Johnny Depp, we've got to go all the way back to the beginning, to the story he himself has told us about how this whole persona was created in the first place.
All right, so the story of Johnny Depp the artist, it really starts with a deeply troubled childhood. It's a narrative he shared himself, and it paints this picture of a brilliant but kind of damaged soul who somehow clawed his way out of total chaos.
I mean, listen to this. These are Depp's own words from his court testimony, and they are just stark. He described his mother as violent and cruel. He talked about not just physical abuse, like having an ashtray thrown at his head, but a kind of psychological torment that he said was, quote, almost worse. This story of trauma is really positioned as the bedrock of his whole artistic identity.
And this chaos, it defined his youth. Can you imagine? The family moved constantly, over 40 times by the time he was a teenager. His escape? It was music. He dropped out of high school convinced he was going to be a rock star. And acting, well, according to the story, that was a complete accident. He was just a struggling musician who only went to meet an agent because his friend, Nicolas Cage, suggested it. He lands his first role, totally by chance.
And that outsider origin story, you can see it translate directly to the screen. All through the 90s, he built this career playing these sensitive, eccentric misfits. Definitely not your typical leading man. I mean, from a guy with scissors for hands to a tragically bad filmmaker, these are the roles that cemented his reputation as the serious, unique talent who just played by his own rules, outside the Hollywood mold.
But then, something really unexpected happened. The outsider, the guy who resisted the mainstream, he accidentally becomes one of the biggest movie stars on the entire planet, and it was all thanks to one character that he was almost fired for creating. $10 billion. Just let that sink in. That's the staggering box office gross of his films, and that number was driven almost single-handedly by one unforgettable character. It's like, overnight, the art house outsider became this massive commercial force.
And the irony is just incredible. His greatest success came from a performance that almost got him canned. He based Captain Jack Sparrow on Keith Richards and Pepe Le Pew, and according to Depp, the Disney executives were horrified. They just did not get the slurring swagger. They were asking if the character was drunk or gay. But his artistic risk paid off, creating a cinematic icon and a franchise worth billions.
And even when he was at the absolute height of his fame, he was still cultivating that outsider image. I mean, just look at the massive blockbuster roles he turned down. He could have been Ferris Bueller, the hero in Speed, or Jack in Titanic. The Wachowskis even wanted him as their first choice for Neo in The Matrix. By saying no to these parts, he was sending a really clear message. I'm not going to be that kind of star.
So that's the established myth, right? The tortured artist who became a superstar totally on his own terms. But over the last decade or so, a very, very different story began to emerge, one that started to complicate this carefully crafted image.
Okay, so the popular narrative that you hear all the time is that his career was destroyed by Amber Heard's allegations back in 2016. But if you look at the box office data, well, it tells a pretty different story. His star power was actually already fading after a whole series of big-budget bombs like The Lone Ranger and Mordecai. These really costly misfires suggest that maybe audiences were already getting a little tired of his whole thing long before his personal life took over the headlines.
And on top of that, testimony from his former manager, Tracy Jacobs, revealed he was becoming, well, difficult to work with. She described his constant lateness during the filming of the last Pirates movie as a really serious problem, and said that behavior was seriously straining his relationship with Disney.
Then there are these other allegations that challenge his image as this generous philanthropist. Critics have accused him of engaging in a tactic that they call a credit con. Basically, it's when someone takes public credit for the charitable work that other people did, all to boost their own reputation.
So here's the allegation, according to a detailed analysis from online critics. They claim a specific pattern. Fan groups would organize fundraisers, raise money, and donate it to charities in Depp's name. The charity would then publicly thank Johnny Depp and only Johnny Depp as the contributor. The core accusation is that he knowingly got all this positive PR for donations he didn't actually make, basically leveraging his fans' hard work for his own benefit.
So all of these conflicting narratives, the artist, the star, the declining asset, the abuser, the victim, they all collided in the most public way you could possibly imagine. A televised defamation trial that became a global spectacle.
Oh, you remember this. Millions of people were tuning in every single day. Social media turned into this massive battleground of memes, hot takes, and just fierce debate. And as legal scholars pointed out, the whole thing often felt less like a court case and more like public entertainment, where the court of public opinion was maybe even more powerful than the actual court of law.
But let's step away from the spectacle for a minute, because there was an actual legal case happening. And to understand what Depp's team really had to prove, we're going to turn to a neutral analysis from the Just Corpus Law Journal.
The whole case was about libel. That's a written defamatory statement. And because Depp is a public figure, the legal standard to win is incredibly high. It's not enough to just prove a statement was false and that it hurt you. You have to prove it was made with actual malice. And that means showing the person either knew it was false or acted with a reckless disregard for whether it was true or not.
So Depp's team had to clear 4 major hurdles. First, prove it was published. That was easy. Second, they had to prove the op-ed's implication of abuse was false. Third, that it caused direct harm to his career. And finally, the hardest part of all, they had to prove actual malice. That meant convincing the jury that Amber Heard knew what she was implying was false.
And here it is, the outcome. The jury found that both parties had defamed each other, but they awarded Depp over $10 million, finding that Heard had acted with actual malice on all 3 statements they looked at. They awarded Heard $2 million, but that was for a statement made by Depp's attorney, not by Depp himself. So legally, it was a massive, resounding victory for him.
But, as we all know, a legal verdict isn't the final word on someone's public persona. The trial might be over, but the story of Johnny Depp, well, that feels like an unfinished chapter, with his future still very much up in the air.
When he was asked about a comeback, Depp himself kind of rejected the whole idea. In his mind, there was no fall and no return. He insisted he was always there. It was just that other people were, quote, not allowed to look at him.
Which leaves us with the ultimate question, doesn't it? In a life that's been defined by plain characters, from Edward Scissorhands to Captain Jack Sparrow to the man on the witness stand, where does the performance end and the person begin? Has the curtain finally fallen, or is this all just the next act?